What is the greatest fuck it, I'll do it myself in history? Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies. During WW2, initially, he approached British and American intelligence to offer them his services. But both countries rebuffed High Monsieur undeterred. Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information, like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence, and he was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation, he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. Nobody ever expects the Spanish in deception. Yes. In the lead-up to Overlord, he confirmed reports that the Allied attack would come from Dover and wouldn't attack Normandy. Then, at the last moment, he confirmed that the Allies in fact would attack Normandy. But it was too late for the Nazis to act on it. So afterwards, the Nazis still trusted him, as they would point to him and say he was the only one who predicted the Normandy invasion. It was technical issues. As always, that meant the data got to us late. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Nikola Tesla was tasked with lighting up the World's Fair, but Thomas Edison wouldn't allow him to use any of his patents, so Tesla had to invent a new light bulb that didn't use any of Edison's patents and could still have thousands made in time for the event. Tesla was definitely one of the most underrated geniuses of his time. I believe he died penniless in 1943, in love with a pigeon. Maurice Hilleman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. Perhaps when no one believed Barry Marshall that H. pylori can cause stomach ulcers, so he thought, screw it, I'll test it on myself, and ended up getting the Nobel Prize. Bless High Monsieur, I have an ulcer, and because of him we have a better understanding of how to treat it. The doctor stationed in Antarctica that removed his own appendix. Goddamn. Wasn't that more like, fuck me, I have to do it myself? Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst-case scenarios. Otis UK are based in Reading. When they answer the phone they say, "Hello, Otis Reading." John Snow, not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. Edit. Corrected the location. Jon Snow's entire life story is a series of fuck it, I'll do it myself moments. From his mother getting the money to send him to school, to basically the entirety of his work against cholera. Because all his life it was always, you know nothing. Jon Snow. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for shits and Giggles. He calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. Don't forget his advances in statistical mechanics. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England so he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could cheat on his wife. No, made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could cheat on his wife and his fourth wife. I remember the quote for remembering his wives: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and fucking march into Rome to declare himself the military leader. Julius Caesar is the August fuck it. *FVCK it. Or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said that Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically shit themselves. Imagine being some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, shits in your land and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He felt that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable. So he brought his complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini. Edit. Thanks to you, TDS 755 and you, King Chameleon 07 for correcting me. Tractor mechanic. Italian manufacturing magnate. Lamborghini tractors are still produced, although not by the car company. He was a tractor mechanic, but he did run a business of tractor mechanics, which is how he got a lot of money to start his car business. I didn't know the tractors are still produced. That's pretty cool. When Nintendo turned down a collab with Sony, then Sony said, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves. The rest is history. To be fair, I think it's what they did. Nintendo and Sony are so different. There's plenty of room for both. Nintendo occupies a niche that I don't think they'll ever lose. Sony and Microsoft are locked in a never-ending war. Yet Nintendo will always have their niche. Doesn't really matter who wins the console war. Nintendo will claim second place. Nintendo are responsible enough to push themselves even without competition though. Microsoft and Sony I think probably need the competition. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded of course, and made back safely. After the revolution he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. John Paul Jones was a madman, badass and basically a pirate since he pillaged lots of villages too. Almost died a bunch. I think the pardon was in the 1990s. And then he met Jimmy Page and Robert Plant and the rest is history. Not a very old story. Manji or the Mountain Man lived in a very remote village of India whose route to nearby was blocked a mountain and hence villagers had to climb it every time. And they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the gov to do a mountain tunnel project there but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years and finally succeeded. There is a Bollywood movie on him too. Title: Manji, the Mountain Man. Probably the time Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer, and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of an African warlords because nobody else would. The kicker is that he's using all his earnings from shilling Nespresso to do it. Also, I thought he was buying time on it and did not outright purchase a satellite. You know what? I always looked at this Nespresso stores and was like, Jesus, how pretentious. But now that I know he's using the funds in some cool satellite crime-busting spree, it makes me want to invest in some Nespresso. He bought satellite time. Not an entire spy satellite. Leroy Jenkins. Oh my god, he just ran in. Closest I can think of is Erwin Rommel during the Blitzkrieg seeing an opportunity to make an exploit and instead of waiting said fuck it and charged 200 miles into French territory. Which is interesting since in WW1 the German leader, can't remember his name, pushed beyond where he was supposed to since the French resistance sucked. But it partially cost them the war for overextending. It's a lot more complex than that. WW1 can best be described as a battle of the fuck-ups. If there wasn't so much death and suffering involved, the vast majority of that war would be written like a slapstick comedy, everyone fully committed to not having a clue what the hell they were doing. Ya know how when you start working somewhere there's a mistake everyone new makes. Trip over a cable, write an address or phone number wrong. Oh, don't worry, everyone does that occasionally. Well, the WW1 version is like, oh, you lost 20,000 men and a dozen artillery guns because you tried to march them up a mountain in winter. Don't worry, everyone does that for a while. Oh, you lost a regiment because you told them to defend a fort against artillery? Don't worry, everyone does that occasionally. It did help that they were using antiquated tactics against modern weapons. It's almost laughable to think of bayonet charging a machine gun. But it happened time and time again because that used to work. Add in the sheer power of the new artillery creating hell on earth to go along with unprepared troops and you have the makings of a slaughterhouse. I had to stop reading books on World War I just because of how fucked it all was. The Battle of the Frontiers is so incredibly fucked up. You have French soldiers wearing bright blue coats and red pants being led by officers on horseback, carrying sabers, walking across no man's land. And they did this because French military doctrine stated that a soldier could on average fire a single shot every 25 seconds. Of course, the Germans had machine guns that could practically fire 25 shots a second. They didn't have a chance. 60 to 70,000 dead, wounded, or captured in the first day of the battle. And it wasn't the bloodiest day of fighting during the war. The dude in the war with wounded fingers, a doctor wouldn't amputate them so he bit them off himself. My great-grandpa did the opposite. They were gonna amputate his feet in WW2 and he said no, so he went AWOL and treated his wounded feet on his own. When he came back with 2 perfectly good feet he basically said, I wanted to keep my feet and I wanted to keep fighting, and as far as I know he didn't get any kind of punishment, even though he was gone for weeks. I imagine they would have sent him back home if they'd amputated his feet so hard to call him a deserter for running off. Especially if he came back to fight. Yeah, they were gonna amputate his feet and send him home, but he wanted to fight. I figured that's why they didn't care too much that he ran off. That's one more soldier they got to keep. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older, male union leaders told the working girls that there really wasn't a point in striking and it would be too hard. Just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them. climbs up on the stage and shouts at the crowd that she's tired of just talk. Time to strike. And everyone went for it? Instant agreement of the workers. Well, this got some attention, so editing to add that I dug up my old research. A translation of what she said, originally in Yiddish, was, "I have listened to all the speeches and I have no further patience for talk. I, too, have worked and suffered, and I am tired of talk. I move that we go on general strike. Now." Quote, "Thank you so much for watching and have a good day."